There we go.
Yeah. Chris, that was that almost felt like a commercial with the music in the background. You should be pouring it like music.
That's right. FUMFA Poets and Writers Live.
With the Poets and Writers Live. Here we are. Here we are. Good evening, everyone. We know that nobody catches this first minute until the replay, but we like to entertain you. Oh, we do have one person joining in. I bet you.
Mom and Dad.
It's Mom and Dad. Hey, 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 Mom and Dad. You know, for the first time ever in the entire history of FUMFA Live, I am not in my apartment at my desk. Yeah, so for 126 streams, I've been at my desk, and this is the first one ever that I'm in the back room at Mom and Dad's house. And you know, let's just give you a little bit of a tour of what you're going to see on the wall. That's me just peering out over the room up over there.
Young Katie. Now, what is that? High school?
That's actually college. That's a college photo. I mean, I look exactly the same, except I have brown hair and I look a little bit younger, just a little bit.
Just a tad.
Just a tad. And we got some family photos over here. Oh, and I also have this grad hat on.
Now, why do you have that hat on there?
Well, because I need to, this needs to be the last master's degree. You know, the MFA kind of kicked it off for me. Then I got a master's in TESOL and I taught for 10 years, and that was an amazing, experience. But adjunct life was hard. And wanted to expand my skills. So these last 10 months since May 2022, I was doing a master's in data science. I actually finished in March. Woo! So you may have seen the posts about that. It was crazy intense. I had never coded or done any kind of data science or machine learning before that. And now I'm just ready to be employed, employers. ready to get myself out there. But it's been a really incredible experience. It was really incredibly challenging, but I learned so much, and it's cool to have a job that is going to be involved with all this interesting AI stuff that's out there, a lot of interesting research, and all kinds of interesting opportunities with companies and organizations. Everybody's got data, Right. So thank you so much. Yes, I'm on to water because I was already champagning earlier. So it was our virtual graduation because I finished in March, and you might have seen some of my little photos from that. I did go on a little trip to treat myself, but we did the virtual graduation today because hopefully this is the last time that I'm graduating. Had a fun little party with Mom and Dad and decided to do the stream from right back here. And honestly, it's a treat. It's nice to mix things up. But anyway, enough about me. Chris, how was your weekend?
My weekend, well, the weather was pretty spectacular.
Oh God! Finally, right?
Finally, we spent the day in the city yesterday. Two of my brothers were there.
Oh my God! Did I see you were at an art exhibit and your brother had art there?
My nephew.
Oh.
Nephew is an artist.
Amazing.
Graduate of RISD, and he's an artiste down there in New York City.
That's amazing.
And, nice gallery show going on right now, and it's my nephew Henry, and so yeah, we all met up to go check out the gallery and hang out and have lunch and a couple of beers and whatnot. So it was a day spent with many Beldens.
Many Beldens.
And we were a real pain in the ass for all the restaurants and bars in the Chelsea.
Did you split the check 12 different ways? 12 different Beldens.
Divided up who bought lunch, who bought drinks, who bought this, who bought that, and that was it. But
Okay, okay. So, hey, I'm sure you were a delight. Listen, where there are Beldens, I'm sure there is happiness and joy.
we
At
were
least where there's Chris Belden, I
we
would
were
say.
happy. We were happy, that's for sure. So
That's
and
so
that was a
nice.
beautiful day. So yeah, that was it. And then today I mowed the lawn, stuff like that.
Well, and you mowed the lawn without having to wear, like, your winter jacket. You got to, like, be in the sunshine. It's finally really feeling like
Sure.
yeah, it's feeling like, I always say that I love summer, but honestly, what I really love is I really love late spring when it's first starting to like get hot and you're super excited. I mean, I like late spring into summer. Anytime that I don't need to wear a jacket and I can wear just like sandals and dresses. That's my favorite.
That's
And
it.
and to go to the beach.
That's it. But it's 8:01, so
Oh
we
my god. Oh my god. Okay, okay. All right. Yeah, down to business here. We need to give our official welcome to FUMFA 127, folks. We are super excited to have with us KJ Micciche and Jessica Cuello. We're going to have two amazing feature readings, and it's going to be a really, really great time. Once again, everyone who's coming in now, if you've seen the stream before, I'm at mom and dad's house. That's why you're not just seeing my purple lights in my apartment. So we're mixing it up a little bit. But we're going to have incredible readings from KJ and Jessica coming up real soon. But before we get to that, Chris, tell everyone what's coming up within the next few weeks.
all right. Well, next week on the 14th of May for number 128 of FUMFA Live, we've got our friend Jack Powers. And we also have Sharbury Ahmed, who's going to be here. Was originally going to be here tonight, and then we did a little switcheroo, and it worked out beautifully. And she'll be here next week. She's got a brand new book out. So that's next week on the 14th. Following week, we are in person at Eco Evolution. That's Friday, the 19th, and we have an all-star lineup. We've got Jack Powers,
Whoop, whoop.
who will be here next week on the stream, but he'll be in person at the open mic. We got Paul Taro doing some hilarious comedy.
Hilarious.
Scott, how do you say it? Urgula?
Scott Urgola. Urgola.
Urgola doing some music, and our friend from tonight, KJ Micciche, will be there as part of her launch, the launch of her new book, the book proposal, which is, and it's going to be like a week-long fiesta in the Long Island, Northeast, New England.
Go get that book, people. Go get that book.
And all kinds of special things, and including our in-person open mic. So check that out. That's the 19th. And the following weekend is Memorial Day weekend.
We're on vacation.
We're grilling and playing badminton and swimming.
And I'll be at the Boston Calling Music Festival. So if anybody's up there, we can go see Foo Fighters together.
You're gonna see some like Metallica or something?
No, Metallica was last year. It was very cool, very cool. This year, Foo Fighters, Alanis Morissette, check it out. Who else? Paramore is gonna be there. Some smaller indie artists that I'm looking forward to as well. Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Just be careful. Put on that sunscreen.
Oh yeah! Oh my God! It's a must. It's a must. Well, I'm excited to see King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard for the first time.
Oh yeah. No, I've heard about them. They're supposed to be
You've heard about them. What a name to begin with. But
Yeah.
they're awesome. They're really fun. I just started listening to them. Yeah. Yeah, pretty cool, pretty cool, pretty cool. But people, you have to come down for our in-person open mic night. We already have like an awesome list of signups. We've got room for you too. And listen, our friend Phil Lemos has signed up, which means he's coming down from Massachusetts. People, the tri-state area, the weather is nice. Come on down, come on down. Just be so excited to have you.
Phil comes down. He doesn't mess around. He drives hours through the worst traffic possibly
imaginable
to be there with us. So
Yeah.
no excuses.
Yeah, yeah, it's always such a great time. But it is now time to get into our incredible readings for this evening. Once again, we have with us KJ Micciche and Jessica Cuello, and I'm going to welcome up Jessica Cuello. Good evening,
Good.
Jessica.
Hi, Katie. Hi, Chris.
How are you?
Hey, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your energy.
Oh, thank you so much. We're so excited to have you. And actually, I had met you back in the fall and we were talking and messaging about this. And it is just so awesome to have you on tonight. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you with your bio. And then I'm super excited to hear you read. Jessica Cuello's most recent book is Yours, Creature from Jackleg Press. Her book, Yours Creature from Jackleg Press. Her book Liar, selected by Dorian Laux for the 2020 Barrow Street Book Prize, was honored with the Eugene Nasser Prize, the CNY Book Award, and a finalist nod for the Housatonic Book Award. Cuello is also the author of Hunt from the Woodworks, 2017, and Pricking from Tiger Bark Press in 2016. Cuello has been awarded the 2022 Nina Riggs Poetry Prize, 2 CNY Book Awards, the 2016 Washington Prize, the New Letters Poetry Prize, a Saltonstall Fellowship, and the New Ohio Review Poetry Prize. She is poetry editor at Tahoma Literary Review and teaches French at in Central New York. Take it away, Jessica.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone out there. I can't see you, but I can feel you. I'm really excited to read tonight from Yours, Creature. Let me get that straight. And this is a brand new book out. It's actually officially not out until May 15th. It's out from Jackleg Press, and I'm going to read from that tonight. The whole book is in a series of epistolary poems in the voice of Mary Shelley. And the poems are addressed to her mother, primarily, Mary Wollstonecraft, the feminist and activist, and also her creature, the monster she made. Some are addressed to years, some are addressed to countries. And I'm going to get started. So this is a book. Not all my books are like this, but this is a book that does have notes at the end because it does draw a lot on history. And I'll include a little bit of that as I read. I know a lot of this history, literary people, maybe everybody is familiar with. So I'll bring in some of it as I go through. And the book is pretty chronological with her life. And the very first poem begins with her birth. An interesting fact about her birth is her mother, Wollstonecraft, died 10 days after she was born from an infection. People didn't yet know that you had to wash your hands, and her placenta wouldn't come out. So the doctor tried to pull it out. And a very unusual fact, they brought in puppies to nurse her milk, believing that the nursing would expel the placenta. It's just an odd little fact. And it is in one of the poems, but I'm going to read another poem from her birth. Dear Mother, I wanted to crawl back into the black interior of you, womb scratched by an animal, but they wouldn't let me. I hung apart like gallows men, dangling for sweet touch. A line from the red radius of your womb went dark. That night, the whole of London raised its eyes to watch the comet pass, except for us. Instead, my currish cry and snarl, my cuss, my cut and run, my cutting tooth, made death a custom house. Your daughter, Mary Shelley. Dear Mother, I am threatened with a return of my girlish troubles, my arm covered red with scabs, my hand a floor at the abattoir. At night the animal cry is the clock strike hour of sour milk. At noon the swinging pig is ankles tied. In the 3 stories of the Skinner house, my stepmother is not you. Her latch on me is fixed, and I learn to regard myself with her repulsion fixed to the mold in her domestic eye. My skin is a revolt. How can it not cry animal when she pulls my hair and knocks me down? With longing for your presence, Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley's father was William Godwin. He was a writer and an intellectual, and he raised her after Wollstonecraft's death, and he gave her a decent education in the home, but he was very rigid and strict. Dear Mother, and all the men are referenced with just initials. So P you'll recognize as Percy Shelley, her lover and later husband, and G is Godwin, the father. Dear Mother, I watch G's fingers on the page, neck with a faint line, neck you loved, so I love it too. He is the glaze through which I see the sun. We call the goat's beard in our field, sweet meadow, go to bed at noon, and wise father men. I touch the feathered heads to feel the god of it. At Chalk Farm we drink the cream of syllabubs. Sister holds my arm, but I am the apple of his eye. I am the reader of his work. His frown can collapse my spine. His grief for you becomes a pillar my attention winds onto. Are you mad that I took your... G is mad with his glacial love and becomes more so despite my maniacal reading toward love. A child can kill its mother, baby wet and monstrous, slipping with eyes opened, black and white, the stewed creation, not asking to be born, but requiring. M. One of the guests that sometimes came to her home as a child was Coleridge. And this poem begins with a quote from Coleridge about the home. The cadaverous silence of Godwin's children is quite catacombish. Silence was my pride, my object stillness, the quiet prize. My brain was a carnation on a stem. Made my God of a father look at me. Quiet petals and silver pages. I meant to read until I was his perfect daughter, but P put one hand beneath my smock, and all the untouched years responded. Godwin had nothing to hold me with. I didn't know. He'd snap me like a stem and toss me on a pile of exile. He was my God, first partner, the sun to my green tissue. He sent me letters with formal closings, as though I was still plicate in my room, leaf ribs pointed toward him, plumule hidden from all but him. Mother, you didn't raise me. Mary Shelley. Another little detail, this one might be more commonly known. Godwin taught, well, the mythology goes that Godwin taught Shelley to read by taking her to her mother's grave where her fingers would touch the letters on the gravestone. Dear Mother, I dangle from his word. My life hangs on the beam of his eye. Before Father took you in, did you ever hang? I think you did not. I think you pure as granite. Remember the gallows on Mercantile Street. I am too pulsed and alive to swing. But the crow has a beak of mockery. The silver eye insists, repeats. Father taught me that space began with my fingertip on your letters. Mary. WOLLSTONECRAFT. Your daughter, Mary. Dear Rejection, 1815. In threes they came, the mother, the father, the holy lover. One by one they cut me loose. The first went underground without me. The second couldn't bear to touch me. I was monstrous, toddling from bed with open mouth, a devil girl with spindly neck. The third was a boy who touched my thigh to prove that I was nectar made, my girlhood gone. He fled whenever I felt too much. Who can love a second time? His face was the only male face. Absence always could subsume me, powered as it was by the first rejection, God's holy three of no, no, never. Yours as I have always been, Mary Shelley. A few of the poems have some lines from her letters. This one has a letter she wrote after her first baby died, 13 days after birth. Dear Mother, I had a dream that my little baby came to life again. What is it to make a life that dies like God, it cannot stand to stay? Cabbage leaves are soft like cloth and smell of tea. I wore them on my breast like medicine. The earthy taste of tea made me hate my flesh. I didn't know if I was made of anything else. Her 13 days were the only time, and they had no measure. Clouds swirled like bands of twisted cloth. I'm sorry to burden you. As a child, I was spooked by the empty hall when Father moved us in. At first, he loved me like I was you, and in the dream, we rubbed it by the fire and it lived. Yours as ever, Mary. This poem references a couple things. One of the most famous things it references is the fact that in 1816, Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, her stepsister Jane, and Byron went to the mountains in Switzerland, and they famously each wrote ghost stories. And this is where Shelley wrote Frankenstein when she was 18. And something else that was happening atmospherically was there was a eruption of a volcano that altered the weather and the air. Dear Mother, I was aware of you the year without a summer. The sunlight reddened. My hands, too, were weather backward. People looted the warehouses of grain. It rained red, but we remained corded, issued from the other. It rained 100 days. The river came to new marks. The world matched our minds, and I invented a doctor who cobbled together a man. I who copy you, Mary. She also had a half sister, Fanny, that was Wollstonecraft's baby with her first lover before Godwin. And Godwin never acknowledged this baby, who was raised by Imlay was the lover who never recognized this baby. And this baby was raised by Godwin as Mary's half sister, and she possibly was also in love with Percy Shelley, and she killed herself near partway through her life. Dear, I heard from G when my half sister died. Go not to Swansea, disturb not the silent dead. If a girl is tired of herself, isn't it her right to leave this world? All this time G lived like I was dead. He broke months of silence to write. There is no crawling back to the beginning, no rewriting of the child. The ticks you get are yours to get. My sister was folded in, a passive missive I was bite. I remember her room in Swansea where I never went, and I remember the chambermaid who kept Fanny's wishes and left her alone, except listen. She was left alone from start to finish. We shared one mother who could not be shared. The living daughter, Mary Shelley. And I have two more. Dear Mother, we rent a house in Italy. Black currants stain our fingerprints. We write in red, mother and child. My skin remembers P's glyptic touch, the sex we had beside your grave. When I was 15, his words were earnest like a slingshot. We gospelized you. I prepare fermented fish. The tiny blade lifts the bones like threads. P is a genius of wonder and invention. Not one domestic task takes his attention. And I, in the kitchen, am a genius of famine. Your loving daughter, Mary Shelley. And this will be the last one I'll read. This is addressed to her monster, the creature that she made. And it also references a little bit the fact that after she fell in love with Shelley at 15, and first they fled to France. When they came back, and she was pregnant again, and they weren't married, and her father refused to see her. So she lived most of her life as a kind of social exile because of her choices. Dear creature, because of what I did, society never let me in. Dim-witted towns don't see you, but I still remember the tactile coolness of earth beside my mother's grave, and P's dry hand, first on my face, then pressed to the second heartbeat between my legs. I spent the rest of my life scrambling to get back alone with him. Because of what I did, because of this, no prayers went up. A wall attached to my growth and tree knot child, curled black worm glistening on the shore, foam child, wave father, he couldn't even swim. Your loving creator, M.S. And that last poem references the fact that Percy drowned in a boating accident, and he couldn't swim. And I think I'm close to my 25 minutes. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to hearing KJ, and I will be sticking around for the questions. So,
Woo! Jessica, thank you so much. How so cool to dive in to Mary Shelley's life the way that you did, and to imagine all of these kind of incredible moments of her life that, if you're a literary person, even if you're not a literary person, I'm sure you've heard some of these just fascinating details of her life with Percy, Shelley, and then this trip where they're with Byron, that whole crowd hanging out with Coleridge, it's kind of surreal but totally amazing. And I think it's so cool that you dove so deeply into her psyche, into her life, and wrote these poems as letters. I think there's so much that we have to ask about in the Q&A,
Yes.
Chris. Just fascinating, just a
Yes,
rich.
I know. Just I like how yeah, where does this idea come from? Don't tell us now because we'll get to it later because it's so interesting. But it's also this idea of, and I was trying to think of a name, because if you wrote a novel about Mary Shelley and all these things, it would be called historical fiction, right? I mean, that would
Right.
just be where I don't know, the publisher would want to call it that at least. And then, so is there historical poetry? Is that what we we can call this? It's just,
And then
I
it's
don't
it's
know.
in it's like a kind of epistolary, like these are letters too, and
Yes,
you're kind of taking that first person perspective as well. I feel like you know what, we're gonna have to ask you what you call it, Jessica. We like it
yeah,
though.
yeah, I wouldn't call it historical poetry just because once I hear the word historical, I get nervous that I have to be truthful,
Right.
which, I don't want to enter poems trying to be accurate because I still use imagination quite a
Of
bit.
course.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, I would say they're probably like super truthful anyway, but maybe factual is the scary part of it, you know?
Mhm.
Well, I
Mhm.
feel like the history is the jumping off point where, your imagination can embody these moments like as these people. And I think that's part of the freedom and the joy of writing is that, you're either creating these characters or maybe these are people that exist or existed. And, we can kind of step into their perspective, like see the world through their eyes. Like, what are they seeing? What are they doing? How are they feeling? What are
Right.
they thinking? And I think that's so cool. Before we let you go, Jessica, I feel like just have to ask you at least this one quick question, which is, have you always been fascinated by Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, or how did you get to this awesome book?
I mean, I read Frankenstein when I was in high school, and I loved it.
Nice,
And then I was really into the romantic poets. I I mean, I
of
just
course.
was.
How
I
could you not?
I loved them in college. I loved them all, Coleridge. But I wasn't she wasn't someone I particularly was obsessed with, but what happened, was the summer before COVID. I was having a lot of trouble sleeping, and I realized that poetry and fiction were keeping me from sleep because I was just getting too stimulated. So
Oh my god, I love
I
it.
need to read like literary biography or literary letters, something that's like gonna bring me down more. That's just got some facts and gets me feeling sleepy. So I just grabbed a bunch of biographies, and this was this dual biography by Charlotte Gordon, where she had the mother and daughter, and she alternated
Uh,
chapters. It's a beautiful book, and
Awesome.
it was like electrified me. And then I wrote these poems like out of that. And then I went and got all these biographies on her, and I was obsessed. And the poems came pretty quickly.
That is
doesn't
so beautiful.
Yeah.
doesn't sound like you got much sleep from doing that.
No, it was not effective strategy for my sleep. Now I'm moving to more like, oh, what do I need? Some more literary criticism or essays that are.
But you know what? I can see where that's gonna go, Jessica. You're gonna start reading this literary criticism, and then you're gonna be like, you know what? I've got a fascinating idea for a way to build a manuscript and just write some incredible poems. And I kind of love hearing that too, because all different kind of works that we're reading, that we're engaging in are serving as a prompt and an inspiration, right? So whether you're just kind of listening to some music, whether you're reading any different kind of thing, there are so many ways, and it's just so important to like take that opportunity to be inspired and get writing when you're kind of feeling that amazing feeling. So that's so cool to hear about the origins of this one,
I
but we'll
mean,
save all the other questions for the Q&A.
I will say that, the kids, well, the younger people like you would maybe call this fanfic, really, you know.
In a way,
I
sure.
mean, it kind of is, right?
In an incredibly artful, poetic way. Like, I think, if you want to, I think we have to embrace it as like a totally positive term, though, because every once in a while, people sometimes say like, oh, it's fan fiction, but I think in like the best sense, in a way, it kind of is. But to me, that just makes it all the more fun. Like,
Me
go and read
too.
it. What
I
is
mean,
Mary
I
Shelley
don't disparage
thinking?
fanfic at all. I think it's
Yeah.
delightful that people do this with writers they love and books they love,
Yes.
and a lot of my students do it, and I admire them for it.
And you know what? They're writing. They're inspired. They're making the writing happen. They're taking that, they're kind of taking whatever the prompt is, whatever the story is, and they're going further with it. It's all legit. I totally
Yeah.
agree with you.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Jessica.
Thanks so much.
And save your questions for Jessica for 9 o'clock. We will see her then. So cool, Chris.
Very cool. Very cool.
Wow.
And I learned a lot. I mean, I've read Frankenstein.
And
There's
some of those like fun details
this
about
and
this
that,
group
but you
of
know what?
poets
I
and
mean,
writers.
we talked
Yeah.
about the truth and not wanting to be pinned down to the truth, but I think you get to the truth by doing something like this. Whether it's completely factual or not is a different thing, but it feels true to me.
And you hear these kind of factoids that come down to you in your classes or, out there in pop culture sometimes about Mary Shelley, but what was her actual life like and her childhood and this relationship and, the
Right.
conditions of writing Frankenstein. It's cool to dive in like that.
It's the whole thing with the puppies and
Ugh,
you know, it's crazy.
it's wild.
No,
Well, that was awesome, Jessica. Thank you so much for that. We need to get to our incredible second reader of the evening. Super excited to welcome to FUMFA Live, KJ Micciche. Hey, KJ.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, a pleasure to have you. You're all in for such a treat. We are super excited about KJ's book, The Book Proposal, and we've gotten to hear a little bit live at Ecoevolution, so come on down. But Chris, would you do the honor of sharing KJ's bio?
K.J. Micciche is a novelist who writes mostly romantic comedy. She hails from Queens, New York, where she spent countless hours curled up under the covers reading The Babysitter's Club as a kid by flashlight way past her bedtime. Now, all grown up, KJ runs a nonprofit organization that teaches kids with dyslexia how to read, and she pens her own stories as well, of course. She's a proud mom of 2 little girls. She and her family live on Long Island and summer in Cape Cod. Her brand spanking new book, which comes out I don't know, any minute now, The Book Proposal, is her debut. And I believe KJ is going to read from it tonight, and everybody needs to go out and buy it.
Thank you. Okay, so yes, as Chris said, this is The Book Proposal. It is my debut novel, and it's the story of a girl named Gracie who is a down on her luck romance author who just can't seem to catch a break in her own love life, and as a result is just kind of a little bit spiraling out of control. So she goes out one night with her girlfriends and gets rip-roaring drunk. And then she retires back to her house and in a fit of madness decides to email her old unrequited high school crush, Colin Yarmouth. And so I'm going to read a selection from around page 50 after Colin has written back, which is the shock of the century. And I'm just going to do a few email exchanges and then a little bit about why Gracie is such a disaster. So this is an email from Grace to Colin when they're still sort of tentatively trying to figure out each other and where they're at in life. And the subject is good morning. Well, you certainly like to get your day started early. To answer your questions, I work from home, and so I'm presently still in pajamas, which is probably my favorite thing about this job. But ghostwriting is only a part of what I do. That's when you're commissioned by other people to write their stories for them. I completed a book not too long ago about the history of ramen noodles. It sounds horribly boring, because it was. But it paid pretty well. I'm also an author. I write fiction, novels mostly. That's a coincidence that you recently moved back to the city from Long Island. I was supposed to move out there. At the time, I was engaged. Let's just say that it didn't exactly work out the way I'd planned. I live in an apartment in Brooklyn instead, which is totally fine. I'd rather be single and happy than married and miserable. What kind of law do you practice? Grace. So then she gets to work and she starts writing, and she allows herself to punctuate her work with breaks where she checks her email. And he writes back. He says, "Hi. Yes, I typically like to get an early start on the day. You're right. There's a gym in my office building, so I work out first thing and shower there. I'm usually at my desk by 8. I'm an estate planning attorney. It's my family's business. My dad was an estate planner, and so was my grandfather. Since I'm an only child, I was coerced to go to law school to take on the family business, but most days I don't mind it too much. I never had a dream job other than becoming a professional baseball player, but I tore my rotator cuff in college, and that was the end of that. I didn't realize ramen noodles had a history long enough to fill an actual book. I bet you'll never look at them as a cheap, tasty lunch again. I'm sorry to hear about your engagement, but I agree with your thoughts on being single and happy versus being married and miserable. In the spirit of full disclosure, I was married up until 6 months ago, and I can say from personal experience that it's not all it's cracked up to be. Neither is Long Island. The taxes are out of control. Tell me about your novels. Anything I might know of? Talk soon. Colin. I received Colin's email after my mid-morning snack of charcuterie. No, I'm not kidding. I have a gorgeous cheese board that I like to use as often as fiscally possible. I roll up some slices of fresh prosciutto and put out some cubes of cheddar, along with a handful of grapes and a stack of water crackers, all purchased at the grocery store yesterday after my writing session. I was feeling especially fancy when I chose the water crackers. They were on sale, prompting the entire idea, but I got carried away and snack time spiraled into a $40+ event. Unfortunately, my bank account is down to $190 now, but I'm sure I can make that last another few weeks. If not, that's why God invented emergency credit cards. Plus, real talk, it was a spectacular treat. I've learned from past mistakes, you should never own something as fun as a charcuterie board and save it for special occasions, because it's highly likely that the people you saved it for will somehow end up not having been worth it in the long run. Then you'll just end up lamenting all the missed opportunities you had to enjoy the thing all by yourself. My dating history offers great proof of this point. I spent most of college just playing the field after I started seeing this fraternity boy my freshman year named Jack. He went to Boston University, not Boston College, and we met at a BU frat party that me and the girls crashed. It was loud, sweaty, and overflowing with the unique combined scent of green alcohol punch and Axe body spray. We danced, and it was glorious. I'd never danced like that with a guy before. His junk grinding all upon my junk, the glazed look in his eyes basically screaming, "I love you." Okay, maybe not, but it was fun. We started hanging out, which I took to mean going steady, until a few days later when I came to surprise him at his dorm room and a half-naked girl answered the door. She had her hands over her boobs and he was lying in bed. So yeah, I kind of learned pretty quickly that college is maybe not the best place to find a soulmate. Once college ended, I moved back home and got a job working at Breaking Bronx, a weekly local rag that was distributed at the grocery stores and bodegas in my fine outer borough. I was a restaurant reviewer and was responsible for the food and stuff column, which ranged from testing new recipes to secret shopping in grocery stores. It paid very little, but I was still living at home, so it really didn't matter. Plus, the beat reporter for sports, Malik Patel Robinson, was fine. He was like music video hot, and he taught me the term badunkadunk at our first staff meeting together. Afterwards, I invited him to come with me to try out a new Caribbean restaurant, and I taught him the difference between Guyanese black pepper chicken and Jamaican jerk chicken. We started hanging out at work all the time, and he became my first real adult boyfriend. We went to movies together, went out to eat, and got really creative in the sex department. We once did it on the picnic table in his tiny backyard because we both lived at home with elderly grandmothers in addition to our parents, and if there's one thing I know, it's that elderly grandmothers are always home. Unfortunately, both of our families were too old school to accept our relationship as anything other than cute. I made the mistake of bringing him over for Christmas, where he met my parents and my Nona. There were so many raised eyebrows, Italian mutterings, and signs of the cross from my grandmother that I told Malik she had dementia, just to not have her seem like such a racist old bat. We broke up when he got a job working for a real newspaper in Manhattan and made enough money to move into his own place. The next guy I dated had great potential, or so I thought. Luke was sweet and attractive, but pretty bland. A great fit for my grandmother, really. I met him at a church pancake breakfast that I was covering for Breaking Bronx. The pancakes tasted like cardboard, but Luke was serving them, and I went back for seconds with fake questions in my mind to ask, like, in the name of journalism. He thought I was funny and sinfully hot, his words, not mine, and we stayed together for about 2 years. Just long enough for him to decide that he was called to serve the Lord and join the seminary. I cannot make this shit up. After Luke, I had a dry spell for a bit, at which point my friend Melly suggested I try online dating. Everyone's doing it, she implored me. I knew she was right, so even though it felt extremely weird to post pictures of myself on the internet in search of a man, my first set of pics looked like I was trying out for a missing persons spot on the side of an old school milk carton. But I had to suck it up and deal with it. I put myself out there on sites like Plenty of Fish, Bumble, and Tinder. I dated a whole lot of train wrecks while trying to navigate my way through this new terrain. If someone were to check my Google search history around that time, one might find such interesting queries as how to know if you're being catfished or how to ghost a psycho. I tried to focus on me, published my first book, saved my money, and moved out of my parents' house and into my current apartment in Brooklyn. Not too long after Melly's wedding, I turned 29. All of a sudden, with the big 3-0 on the imminent horizon, I began to panic in earnest, thinking I would never meet someone. In reality, Melly was the only one of my friends who was married, but something about the number drove me crazy, and I felt like with each day that passed, more and more guys were disappearing off the market. I once read that the older you get, the less your eggs care about which sperm they'll take. So picture this. Your young, cute eggs are feeling themselves, and they won't just bring home any sperm for insemination. No, they want that good sperm. Meanwhile, the eggs in reserve sit around aging, and by the time they're old, they'll basically take whichever sperm can make it all the way up the canal. Like the old egg is saying, "Hey, you made it here. Might as well let you in," with a yawn and careless shrug. This is sort of what happened to me once I saw 30 looming. Convinced there would be nobody left on the market, I began discovering new websites to post my profile on. I was 29 and 2 months old with one foot clearly in the grave when I met Scott Gross on freezerburn.com, a dating app designed for women looking for love who are also considering freezing their eggs. The site's promise, find love in 3 ovulation cycles or receive a $500 credit towards egg freezing at one of our exclusive partner facilities, sounded like a win-win. And sure enough, I was matched with Scott halfway through my second month online. He checked all the surface criteria. Number 1, he was not living with his parents. Number 2, he had a full-time job. And number 3, he had more hair on his head than on his body. In fairness, he skated by on the last one. His lower back harbored a situation that he referred to as peach fuzz, but if I ever saw a piece of fruit covered in long brown curly hairs like that, I would assume it had gone very, very bad. However, Scott's capacity for email was garbage, and it was only because I chid myself for being too hard on people that I accepted his invitation to go out on a date. I'll never forget the message. Drinks at McSweeney's, 7 p.m., tonight. McSweeney's, a pub known throughout Brooklyn for its hot roast beef dip and wide variety of Irish ales on tap, was only a few stops away from my house on the Q train. I wore tight black jeans that showed off my curves, tall black boots, a flowy gray sweater, and a leather jacket. Scott showed up a few minutes late, but one flash of his sheepish grin and I was hooked. He admired my outfit, didn't say a word when I ordered the technically shareable cheese fries, and ate them all by myself, and blew out to the side when he burped after a long swig of his beer, instead of burping in my face. He reminded me of a bearded collie with his hair pushed back in a trucker's cap, a first trimester belly that he could still suck in if he wanted to, covered up by an old Linkin Park t-shirt, and an average-looking lower half clad in a pair of loose-fitting jeans. He told corny jokes, still smoked weed on rare occasions, and watched football every Sunday with his friends from college at a bar in Eastern Queens. He held in his farts when we had sex, but let them out right afterwards, always announcing them first. He shared an apartment in Williamsburg with 2 other guys, so going to visit him was not unlike taking a trip to a fraternity house. But Scott had a job in Manhattan, working as the tech guy for a small CPA firm, and he liked to watch movies, eat out, and sleep in on weekends, which made us a pretty good match. I could live with the fact that the toilet seat at his place was always up, and you could bet on finding at least 3 or 4 stray pubes lining the rim, or that I could never leave a toothbrush at his apartment because I couldn't be sure it would remain unused by one of his drunk roommates. He was college educated and ordinary, which seemed non-threatening, at the very least. After dating for maybe a month or so, we began spending more and more time at my place, and because there was an actual kitchen there stocked with proper supplies like pots and pans, I learned that Scott liked to cook. His propensity for creating fun meals out of cheap household basics like chicken and dumplings stew made with Bisquick or turkey and cheese roll-ups baked in crescent roll dough took our relationship to the next level. Finally, some common ground, I thought. I loved taste testing Scott's creations, and he would revel in my excitement with that puppy dog look in his eyes and heavy hints that I could reward him in the sack. You like my chicken parm? Well, perhaps you'd like a taste of the meat stick in my pants for dessert. Often I obliged because, well, isn't that what you're supposed to do in a relationship? And I guess that made me a keeper because after the requisite trips to visit mom and dad on both sides, and after 9 months of cohabitating at my place on my dime, Scott proposed to me after sex on my 30th birthday. We should get married, he said. You wanna? That was it. No ring, no bravado, but I said yes, and it counted as a real proposal. We picked out a ring together, and over a big Italian dinner in the city, I asked Alicia, Tori, and Melly if they would be my bridesmaids. Melly was already married, and Alicia was engaged. Tori was anti-marriage, despite living with her girlfriend of 4 years. They were all so happy that I had finally found someone who checked off all my boxes, so of course they eagerly agreed. I should have taken it as a sign. My married name was going to be Grace Gross. The universe was definitely trying to tell me something. Then, hunting season began. House hunting, registry hunting, dress hunting. I tried to keep my cool through it all. Scott could have cared less about any of the details. He felt the wedding was my job to plan, but I dragged him to everything, insisting that it was supposed to be the romantic affair of our dreams. We had a budget, and my parents had given us 10 grand. Melly, my maid of honor, had recently gone through the same thing, only her parents were super over-the-top generous, and she was not on a budget. So she enjoyed helping me navigate the challenge of dress shopping with financial restrictions. A natural shopper, she also loved reliving the trips to Bed Bath & Beyond with the scanner gun. We put together a binder of ideas, like a Pinterest board but in physical book form, while Scott tagged along, absently surfing the internet on his phone, giving us the silent thumbs up whenever we presented him with an idea. In retrospect, I could have suggested that we get married in a vat of green jello, and he would have responded like the human form of an emoji. About 4 months before our wedding, we were narrowing down venue options when out of the blue, Scott's mother recommended a wedding planner. She was the daughter of a friend of the family, but Scott hadn't seen her since they were toddlers. Since she was just getting started in the business, she needed referrals, and Scott's mother was happy to help. Scott didn't care. His mom's interference meant it was one thing less for him to do. But I cared. Hadn't she seen the binder I'd made? I was perfectly capable of planning my own wedding. And yet I obliged, not wanting to piss off my soon-to-be mother-in-law. Scott and I met Alana Shapiro on a Saturday. That much I remember. Scott made first contact on the telephone, and they made plans for us to all get together for breakfast. Alana was tiny, with blonde wavy hair, a pointy nose, and pouty lips. Even with heels on, she made me look like a gorilla by comparison. She was skittish and giggly, and her voice was reminiscent of a baby. I hated her from the moment I laid eyes on her. We met in a diner on Long Island, and while Scott ate pancakes and I ate the meat lover omelet, Alana ordered cottage cheese and fruit. She finished 4 whole bites of it before pushing it aside, claiming to be full. Then we rode in her car from one wedding venue to the next. Scott sat in the front because he needed the leg space, and I sat in the back seat like a third wheel. After visiting 7 different catering halls, we decided to call it quits for the day, and she dropped us off at the nearest Long Island Railroad station. Well, I said, when we were seated side by side in the train car, I'm never doing that again. I thought it was kind of cool, he replied. Seeing all those places, I kept trying to figure out which one had the best bar setup. I rolled my eyes. How about this? You narrow it down to 3 venues, and I'll choose from the 3. You sure? He asked. Definitely, I said. I didn't give it much thought after that. When I told Melly that my fiance would be spending weekends alone visiting wedding halls with itty-bitty Alana Shapiro, she encouraged me not to worry. He's marrying you, and the way you describe her, she sounds like one of those minions from Despicable Me. I laughed. Little did I know the joke was on me. After more than 2 months of searching, Scott still couldn't come up with a top 3 list of event spaces for me to check out. I was busy incessantly between researching ramen noodles, creating a new Pinterest-inspired binder of house decorating ideas, meeting with our realtor, and endlessly preparing for the details of our upcoming nuptials, which was particularly challenging without the venue booked. I should have thought it odd when he showed up at my place after 10 p.m. after long Saturdays with Alana, but I chalked it up to him being diligent and genuinely searching for the right place for us to say I do. I did not expect that he would be depositing his seed in her garden instead, in the back of her stupid Jeep Cherokee, or worse, in one of the catering hall bathrooms. That was last July. By August, the stick turned blue, I guess, because he told me we should, quote, put a pin in the wedding plans for now. At the time, he cited feeling, quote, confused about things. Tori made me a voodoo doll of Scott, and I put pins in every part I could think of, through his eyes, in his mouth, up his ass, and in the empty space between his little stuffed legs where his dick should have been. I kicked him out of my apartment, but thanks to his own laziness, he never fully moved out of his place in Williamsburg, so he just went back there. He told me she was pregnant just before Thanksgiving, once she decided to keep the baby. Suddenly, his confusion made a lot more sense. I never got a refund back from Alana Shapiro for services rendered, and I'm now the proud owner of a $1,500 Maggie Sotero wedding gown that I can't return. Beauty and the Beast gave birth to a healthy baby boy, 6 pounds, 15 ounces, 22 inches long on Friday, April 13th. Nobody saw the irony in that but me. And sure enough, they got married on Long Island. Alana Shapiro was the wedding planner. For my own wedding, she posted on Facebook. They moved into a house that my realtor found for us, and she completely stole my happily ever after, leaving me with a bitter taste in my mouth for all things romance. It got so bad that this year, I bought myself a box of chocolates on Valentine's Day just so I could light it on fire in my bathtub. The struggle is real. So this is an email that Grace sends back to Colin. And after this, I'll stop. No, you've probably never heard of any of my novels. I write women's fiction. Well, romance, to be honest. I'm impressed that you get up so early to work out. I jog sometimes, but I'm not super faithful about it. Speaking of faithful, that sucks about your divorce. I mean, it's good that you're happier now, but it sucks to have to get divorced, especially only a few months into a marriage. I understand what you went through, though. My ex-fiance got our wedding planner pregnant. So yeah, that didn't work out as planned. It was also fairly recent. Their baby was born last week. Oh, in fact, it was the day before my initial drunk email to you. I went out for a girls' night to celebrate not having made the worst decision of my life and had one too many. So not exactly a work celebration. You can call me a mentirosa if you can figure out what that means. Well, I gotta run. I have a big deadline coming up, and I should really try and focus on my page count. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Sincerely, Grace. So that's where I'll stop for now.
I got my water bottle just like fell down. I was like in and out. It was crazy. Oh my god! And it was KJ. It was awesome. I was so chaotic coming on screen just now. KJ, oh my god, I want to punch this guy. I want the voodoo doll too. I want to get him. I know he's a little terrible guy, but I want to get him so bad.
That's fine.
KJ, it was honestly so much fun. So much of that is just so super duper relatable. You know, from the charcuterie to the cruddy, like super mediocre dudes.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and but also like the pain of all of that, right? So there's so much humor in that, but there's also, you know, so much disappointment and heartache mixed in. But you know, it's just so much fun. I could listen to you forever, and everybody needs to go out there and get the book so they can find out what happens with this email situation.
I know.
With the old flame, with a crush, with the high school crush. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. It's so funny, and at the same time, you know, it just boils your blood, right? Reading about this particular situation, and then Colin, the guy, has his own backstory, which is equally enraging. But
Yes.
so there's so much fun, and you know, I mean, just we're going to ask you lots of questions, but it's like,
Of course.
but you know, those of us who write fiction and poetry, sometimes we use our own experiences as a launching pad, and I hope none of this ever happened to you, KJ.
You know,
Definitely didn't. I have to say, there was another selection that I thought about reading for tonight, which is about her high school boyfriend. But the timing like wasn't quite right on it, so I didn't. But
right.
That one is really based in reality.
Oh my god!
So it's really, it's funny. Like when I look back on it and I reread it, it's just, and it's spot on too, right? Like it's exactly who that guy was.
Yeah.
And like he'll never read this book. So he'll never
right.
A whole thing about him, like all of the hideousness. And he was one of those guys that just like really thought who he was. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Oh, I'm the man.
I'm the shit. Yeah,
not the man. And like, so it's that part's really kind of selfishly vindicating. You know,
that's awesome.
It's a lot of fun.
That is so cool.
Vengeance is one of the reasons that we write, I think.
It wasn't even really vengeance. I mean, it just kind of happened, and I was like, "Oh, that's a good character."
Yeah, well, I think the stories that happen to us are the biggest inspiration, and kind of pulling from that reality and doing a little fiction remix on it is one of the most one of the most interesting things you can do. Or I mean, sometimes life surprises us so much that there's just nothing nothing more real than sharing something wild that happened, or embedding that somehow. But I think what's so cool about romantic comedy is that it is so fun and so funny, but it's also painfully, it's like so painfully funny, but so like painfully relatable at the same time. I think that's part of like the joy and the resonance of romantic comedy, which I just can't get enough of. And excited, very excited for the book. And you know what? I think we should just go. I'm so sorry. I had like a message up here. I can get rid of that. I think we should go straight into the Q&A. I think we've got two awesome authors with us this evening, and let's give another round of applause for Jessica Cuello and KJ Micciche.
Brava, brava.
Both of you, we always kind of look at like the beautiful magical synergy that happens between our two features of the evening. And we do put thought into trying to like match people up, but we kind of did this little schedule switch, and this was kind of perfect because we have front and center these very outspoken, powerful women sharing exactly what's on their mind in two very different situations. And I think this is actually a fascinating combination, Chris.
It truly is. Sometimes, I think as the evening goes on, I say, okay, what's tonight's
The
connection
synergy?
here? And it's true. We've got Mary Shelley back in the day dealing with all that craziness, and then we've got Gracie here in the modern world with emails and all this.
Online dating. Oh my gosh, it was so, I was sitting back here like I was listening to my girlfriends, and even with Mary Shelley to some degree, I was like, or like, no, or like that man.
Well, they're both writers, I mean, they're both writing. Mary Shelley's, Frankenstein, and
Percy could be a real dick.
ramen noodles.
Yeah.
Never know.
I love it. Well, let's dive in to our famous first question. And everybody out there in the audience, please get your questions into the chat for Jessica, for KJ, for both, for all of us. No, for our guests. And Chris, will you kick off the questions?
Of course.
With our famous first question?
Yeah, we'll start with Jessica and then move over to KJ. But how has being a writer, a poet, changed your life?
It's a huge question.
Wow, that's a big question. Wasn't prepared for
I'm
it.
just gonna drop that bomb on you.
Yeah. One reason that's hard for me to answer is I feel like I was a poet and a writer even before I could talk.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
When I was little, I mean, I didn't identify that way, but I already felt like books. I had these intimate relationships with books, and I felt like I was in conversation with them, and I knew that I would be speaking back to books. So in a way, it's like there was no life. If there was a life before that, I don't know what it was about. I think it changes. I'm also a teacher, and I think being an artist in any way has a pretty profound impact on the rest of your life and the other things you do. It affects your relationships with friends and your own kids. And I think it makes me a better teacher. if you keep it, I think, the hard part as a teacher, the hard part in for anyone in this culture is keeping your artistic self,
Yep.
feeding it, giving to it, taking the time, knowing you probably won't be paid,
Yep.
knowing you can spend hours and hours on something that may never get published, or if it gets published, it'll get read by a few people.
Right.
And so I think what you have to do to keep that part of yourself living affects how you approach other things in your life. I think it makes you attentive and maybe gentle and
Yes.
imaginative. And I
Yes,
think
yes,
my
yes.
teaching style has become really imaginative. And whatever I'm like obsessed with artistically kind of comes into my classroom in weird ways.
I love that.
I started trying translation this year, and so now I have my students translating, and I wasn't
Ooh.
sure how it would
Wow.
go, but they love it, and just watching how they think about language has been exciting. So
Awesome.
that's my best answer to a very hard question, Chris.
No, that's a
So
great.
like a really massive question. I think that's such a beautiful and also like expansive answer. I have like a teeny follow-up question before we pass this question to KJ. Is when you said like before you could speak, like when you were that young, like you felt like you were already a poet and a writer. Like what aspect was it about your observation, or was it about like what things meant to you, or the emotions you held inside you? What do you think that was at that time? It just or it just like was your essence?
I think like a lot of kids who grew up in the 70s, we weren't really free to speak and feel.
Hmm.
I mean, I think I partly felt that way.
Yeah.
And so I think I had a really rich interior life, which is
Awesome.
where I think the writing life begins.
Right.
And
Interesting.
it deepens inside. But, that's maybe not true for slam poets. It's very external.
Right.
So I think it sounds arrogant, but I think I had a really rich interior life that was not a part of the external. It wasn't part of my school life. It wasn't really even part of my family life. It was like
Yeah.
my own private life.
Your own, and I don't even think that's arrogant at all, because I think there's so much imagination and just like raw, pure, emotion and inspiration and jumping from one thought to another that, we kind of learn to control, and maybe some of that imagination we lose as we get older. So I think there's something really beautiful about that like you can kind of tap in from that time and be like, there was really something there that
Yeah.
that stayed with me.
No, I identify with that a lot, because I mean, I grew up, at least my, teen years and or some earlier years in the 70s as well. And I never really thought of the 70s that way, but I mean, it certainly was true
Yeah.
of, for me. And yeah, so it's like, you create these worlds in your head, and they have to come out somehow, hopefully, or else you go nuts.
Or you're doing, as much living in your head as you're doing out of your head.
Mhm.
But you come to this really overpowering feeling. It's like almost inevitable to release that world
Right.
Yeah.
and share it. Like I think our need to be connected to other people is deeply profound.
Yes.
And
Right.
the perversion that comes when we don't act on that, I think relates to the violence. And, I almost feel sometimes that's like misdirected emotion that's trapped for
Oh,
people,
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, particularly, I mean, if you don't have a mentor type person, as a kid, like whether it's a writer or somebody who just, loves books, a teacher, and sometimes you just don't find that person for a long time.
Or just anybody who helps you like to kind of like tap in, express yourself, get connected, feel loved, feel a part of something. That's really, really critical.
Well, it was very, very weird. I mean, nobody that I grew up around wrote books, where I was. It was like, that was just like a crazy thing. Who the heck does that?
KJ, over to you. This huge question. How has writing changed your life?
So it is really very profound. And I feel like Jessica spoke about it so beautifully that I will not do it justice, but I will try. I grew up in kind of a different circumstance where I was an only child, and like it said in my bio, like it seems so silly, but like I hid under the covers reading books. Like
I love that.
like
I love
my
that image.
true existence. I found like joy in the Queens Public Library, and like would leave with like armloads of books, and like that was like where I felt like I was seen as a little girl.
I love
And
that.
then I loved to write, and I didn't do it often. Because from like my mid-teenage years, everything that happened in my life was very much reactive. Like things happened, circumstances, and I had to react to them. And so then I went to a school that I didn't think I was going to go to because it was reaction, to something else. And so it was all this like domino effect. And then I got older, and I made major life decisions, all reactive to things that had happened. And even then, I met and married my husband, who's amazing, and I love tremendously. And even that, it was a little bit reactive. It was like, okay, this is where I am supposed to go, and so this is me reacting to that.
Right.
I had my children, who again love dearly, amazing, beautiful 2 little girls, and found myself reacting to the new reality of motherhood, right? Like, okay, well now I have to be this different person. I'm also a, full-time employed human person who has a job and like, all of these professional things, but I have to shift and bob and weave and like be for them, right? Like I have to exist for them.
Right.
And then I turned 40 and I went back to school. And I went to
FUMFA.
And it was so weird because even that was reactive, because I had gotten a grant at my job that I needed to get, and I needed to get a master's degree. It could be in anything for this certification that I am in the process of going towards. A very long, lengthy 8-year certification.
Wow.
In my practice, which is dyslexia therapy. You had to have a master's. It could be in anything. And I was like, oh, I like reading and writing, and I want to go back for a master's in writing because I think authors are cool as anything. And I just want to see if I could do it. I just want to see it. And it was the first time that I could really feel like something was happening that was authentic and true to that little girl under the covers. Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Awesome.
Like, it brought me right back to that. So the first semester, I finished a whole manuscript, and I had never done anything like that before in my life. I finished the manuscript, and my mentor was like, okay, so you're a psycho. And I was like,
in the best,
like, what do I do now? And he was like, well, you finished your thesis, so like, I guess keep writing. I finished 4 manuscripts in 4 semesters.
Oh my God, KJ, that's amazing.
And the first 3 were like women's fiction, like heavier, more family drama. Like I was really trying to work through some of the stuff, it was very therapeutic. Yeah. And then this one was just like, screw it. Like, I just want to be funny. Like, I just want to enjoy, right? And if I can find an agent, cool. And if I can get it published, great. And like, let's just put a book out into the world so that I like leave behind this thing as like my legacy for my children. Woo. And it spiraled. I mean, now it's a 3-book deal, and this is the first of the 3. And like, there's all this really cool stuff happening. But it was the first thing in my life that ever really happened that I felt I owned. Yeah. And so it changed everything, because now I get to write the story. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
right. Yes. I'm in control of this. I own this. I created this. It wasn't just kind of reacting or sort of bouncing through life, handling expectations. And that also it was like honoring this most essential part of yourself.
Yes. And it's so, I count myself so fortunate, because I mean, I never thought that I would be able to identify as like an author. Like, it's, like I was like, oh, maybe I'm like a tentative like writer. Like maybe I write, right? But like now I'm like an author. Like I'm trying to really own that as like my identity. And it's so cool because it has changed everything for me.
That's
That's
amazing.
how I feel about like, myself and the world, and like the way I see things and the way I absorb them, and the things that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna use that in the story. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Completely.
it's been really, really, really magical. So
That's awesome. This is a big giant question, and we typically get pretty epic answers, and both of you just had incredible, awesome answers that just, keep us inspired and make us so excited. Thank you so much to both of you for answering that question and sharing so much great stuff with us. You know what? We have a question for KJ, something you just mentioned, and we have a question for Jessica coming after that, but I am going to pop this question for KJ. Speaking of your FUMFA mentor, from Valerie Martinez Peralta. Hey, Valerie. What was it like submitting these pages? I think I was. They said, "Oh, you're a psycho," but I don't like that word. I think you're a machine. You're on fire.
So I could go on about my mentor. I mean,
Who's your mentor?
Al Davis. Al Davis.
Al.
Al Davis.
Like I could go on. He was my fairy godmother in this Cinderella fairy tale. That's what he was. He believed in me in a way that no one ever had. He encouraged me in a way that no one ever had. And he is like a Bob Dylan, like Woodstock, like he's deep Minnesota. Like he's not like me. We make zero sense. And he was so generous to read all of this work that I kept generating that is outside of his interest, outside of his comfort zone, and to give me really genuinely thoughtful feedback and to help guide me like into all of the studying that I was doing about publishing that was all really on my own.
Right.
So submitting these pages to him, I mean, these pages, by the time I got to this, it was like old hat, right? Like I was used to, I could give him my diary from when I was 12 and he'd read it.
Oh my God, he knows it all.
But I don't know. I think I was more worried about giving him my pages when I had first started because I didn't believe in myself at all. And his critique, that right there.
Oh my God.
The very first thing he ever critiqued of mine. The first like 18-page sample from FUMFA that I ever submitted. That's his critique answer right there. And it stays on my wall because it was one of the best pieces of writing I ever received about my work.
That is the most beautiful story, about a mentor connection. And I think any of us, here among us or out there who have had a really incredible mentor just really knows how special that is. And I think that is the most beautiful thing, that it is up there on your wall at all times. That is awesome, KJ. And so great to hear about you and your amazing experience with Al. All right, we've got a question for Jessica. Is this James Garcia from Open Mic? Is that you? James Garcia, awesome to see you here. So he says, Madame Cuello, which I think is a beautiful way to address you. As long as you feel comfortable with it. So James says, you have such a great, unique poetry style. Is there a specific poet that inspired or influenced your style? You were talking about the Romantic poets earlier, or who else?
Well, first of all, I'm going to tell James, he was my student maybe, James, maybe it was like 10 years ago.
No.
I taught him French, so you don't have to call me Madame anymore.
Oh.
That is so cute.
That's great. I love that.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, there's some students, 2013, he put in the comments. Yeah, so.
Oh my God, no way.
Yeah, I'm glad you went, James. I'm really thrilled that you went to.
He goes to our open mic and you were his teacher? Whoa, the connections are blowing my mind right now.
That is amazing. Small world.
Totally.
Good for you, James. I would love to hear some of your poems. I'm glad
he plays guitar. We were his first music open mic. He's rocking it. We'll connect you, Jessica.
Okay, this is amazing. Yeah, no, James was so creative in my class. In fact, I still have one of his skits on my computer who was your funny friend?
Oh my God. I love this.
Checkers. You guys did a skit that I used as an example for a long time, and I still can see you at the end of the skit going, French, that's French.
Garrett Hickey.
Garrett Hickey, that's right. Garrett. I hope he's doing well. So I could see your creative spark way back in 2012, 2011. So the question was about influence. I read a lot, and I've been reading a long time. So it's hard for me to answer that question because it's always changing. Every book that I've written is sort of, I would say every book I've written has different poets that are in my head. And
Cool.
It changes a lot. So it's a question it's too hard for me to answer because I don't like to narrow it down.
Okay.
And it changed like every 5 years. I have new favorite poets,
Mm-hmm.
and I read a little bit slower now that I'm in my 50s. But there was a time when I was just like plowing through poetry
Tearing
books.
through.
Now I go slower, and I can't read at night because they get me too pumped up for sleep. So that's the main time I read. So, but yeah, James, it's good to hear from you.
This is blowing my mind right now. Love it.
Yeah, it's a wild world.
It is. That's awesome. Well, it's so cool that you're inspired by the people that you're reading at the moment as well. Is there anybody that you're reading at the moment who we can know about?
Well, I've been reading Helen Sixou, the French writer. That's what I was reading this morning. I just ordered Vivi Francis's new book. I'm very excited for that. And I reread for the Yours Creature. I reread Lucy Brock-Broido, who's one of my favorite poets for a long time. I reread her book called The Master Letters because it's a similar kind of epistolary book from the viewpoint of Emily Dickinson.
Oh, cool.
It's a beautiful book.
Ooh.
And it's hard for me to read her and not copy her because she overpowers me a lot. But I did reread that book when I knew what I wanted to do with this book and I knew the form that it would take. I pulled that book off the shelf again and started to look at it in terms of craft a little bit more again. So
nice. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those with us, Jessica. Well, and you know what? This now makes a lot more sense to me. Follow up from James. Also, how come you teach French when you're clearly talented with English and interested in history? I love this. You should be. I mean, you could be teaching it all, Jessica. I mean, you're covering all the bases.
First of all, James. I taught English at your high school for like 9 years.
No way.
Yeah. And there was a period of like 6 years where I was in both departments. I had like French 5, French 4, English 12, English 9.
That's amazing.
And I've been all over the place, but I really moved all the way into French 4 years ago because it's bless English teachers. They work harder than anyone else if they're doing their job well because teaching writing is so challenging and grading writing. And sometimes I would just grade. I graded like an animal. Like I probably gave too much feedback, which is what you do when you love writing and you want to make people better writers. But I started waking up in the morning. I couldn't open my fingers. And I like the pull to be a poet has gotten stronger every year of my life. So I just I just shifted into the language department, and partly it's just easier. I mean, I'm just going to say it's an easier
it's letting you
job.
Take home more of yourself at the end.
I don't need to grade, I used to spend 15 minutes on an essay. Well, if you have 160 kids, like the math on that is.
I hear you.
So French I grade in an hour or 2 hours. And I also get a really special group of kids that choose to be there. I get a lot of artistic kids like James and kids who appreciate my humor, which is really good
Nice.
for my self-esteem. Students laugh at my jokes. So, and then students who will just call me Madam Cuello for 10 years, into their 30s. And I have another student, I keep telling her, I'm like, you don't need to call me Madam Cuello. And she's like, I will call you Madam Cuello.
I must.
You know?
It has a nice ring to it, you know. So
It has a beautiful ring to it, and that just was so delightful. James, so great to have you out here. What an awesome connection. We've got a question for KJ in the chat from Ed Cuello. You work full time and write. How do you discipline yourself to make sure you finish a writing project while balancing work? Or how do you discipline or not discipline yourself? How do you set it up? How do you get it done? When do you get it done? Does it just flow? Do you have a set time? It's a great question.
Yes, I have a set time. Yeah, I work all the time. I am always at my office. I'm at my office right now.
Oh my God.
I'm doing this at home. This is not a thing that would work at home. I am still holding myself to a novel a semester.
Oh my God.
That's just how I feel like I'm hardwired that way now.
That's
and
incredible.
So I'm trying to produce a new draft of something every semester. And so I live by like the semester schedule.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
Well,
and I write first thing in the morning. Usually I'll come into the office around like 7:15. I work out. I have a treadmill here. And then I get off the treadmill full of endorphins. I sit down and I try and write. Like I just get it all out as much as I can. And then I stay here. I mean, I'll write for hours, but maybe till 11 or 12, depending on what I can squeeze in. Mm-hmm. And then I shift to like my work. I don't like leave to go eat or anything. Like I'll eat bits or whatever is around, like scraps. Like I'm like raccoon in the fridge, right? And then I'll go right into like my like work that is running this business, and then I tutor kids in that late afternoon as part of my job. So I have like these. It's like a 3-act thing that goes on, and then I go home and I am with my family. So that's like the 4th act. So I don't know. That's kind of how I maneuver through the day. It's too hard and it's a lot and it's not sustainable. But for now, it's all I know.
I think it's amazing, and I think if that flow works for you and you're feeling energized by it, and it's just kind of pouring out of you in that morning time that you have, it just sounds like what you were saying before. Like this is kind of fully mine, and it's fully like my joy, and it's tapping into this part of me. It sounds like it's like a kind of a part of your day always, because it's like part of breathing. It's like part of your health. It's part of like doing what you need to do to feel good and to produce this incredible creative stuff. It sounds like a lot, but it sounds like the most natural thing for you. It sounds but like just really, really awesome and beautiful and productive and authentic. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's funny. My husband has a joke. It's not like a funny joke, but it's like a joke, right? That he says to our kids, like, if mommy didn't work out or didn't write, don't speak to her. Just don't bother. It's not right. That's gonna work out for you. So just leave her be. Make sure the mommy has like happy wife, happy life. He like really lives by that mantra. And so he says, make sure that mommy gets a chance to write and that she gets a chance to work out, and then she'll be a happy mom.
It's something you need to feel good, to live, to be healthy. It's that much a part of you. I think that's a pretty compelling thing. That's awesome, KJ. We could go on forever. There are so many more questions that I have for the both of you, but since we're getting close to 9:30, I feel like it's time for us to unleash our famous last double question. Chris Belden. Oh, I realize I'm on the wrong side of the screen today.
Oh God.
I'm on not the wrong side, but like the different side that I'm normally on, but I didn't even notice because I'm in a different room. Oh my God.
We're trying all kinds of new things tonight. Yes.
Crazy.
So we'll go again, Jessica and then KJ. So yeah, it's a double question. You kind of answered part of the question, Jessica, but
True.
we can work with it. So part 1 is a pearl of wisdom for the writers out there, poets or fiction writers, some piece of writing advice. And then part 2 is a book recommendation. So any specific book you've already mentioned a few, Jessica, but you can mention them again or just come up with another one. Use this opportunity. So, pearl of wisdom, and then a book recommendation.
I'm really averse to pearls of wisdom. I'm just going to say that.
Hot take. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Pearl of wisdom. Ignore pearls of wisdom.
I think, and I think it's a 70s thing, like just getting so much advice, lecturing, that I was like, I think I came out of the womb resisting that. Not like often,
Yeah.
in a way that hurt me. Not letting anyone tell me what to do. And I think because I'm in a school all the time, that I'm not sure I believe in pearls of wisdom anymore. In the moment, like I mean, I only believe in them in the moment with the person that needs them, that I can see and know. I don't really believe in general advice for anyone, because I think we're often wrong. But maybe that can be the pearl of wisdom.
Yeah, that's a great one.
What's true for you as a writer is not going to be true for anyone else, and you really do have to find your own way.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of walk it by yourself often.
Right.
And, yeah, there, I'm going to go with that.
And that is a really powerful one, that we don't necessarily always hear, and not necessarily framed in that way. Like, I don't want to give this like blanket pearl of wisdom. I just want to say, like, not everything works for everybody. You have to find your own way, and don't be ashamed of that. I think that's incredibly powerful.
I sometimes just think I'm so oversaturated with like 10 things to do here and 5 things to eat, and so much information telling you how to live. And I sometimes I want peace. I think we all need, to just be still. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to let KJ answer because I know she has something good.
Okay, KJ, yeah, KJ, go ahead, and then we'll do book recommendations. Go ahead. What's your pearl?
So, I mean, I agree with Jessica that just doling out wisdom like makes it feel like as if I have any right to do such a thing. Right? Definitely don't. What I will say is that something that I've kind of held as a mantra throughout this whole experience of becoming a published author is that no one is going to care more about this than I do for me. And so I owe it to myself to learn all of the things and to not be too afraid to do all of the things, no matter how uncomfortable they make me.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. Yes.
Even like doing this, as you both know, is terrifying for me. The open mics, the putting it all out there is all so scary, but no one will care as much about the launch of this book as I do. And so I have to be true to myself and do everything I can to put it out there in full earnest.
1000%, KJ. I really, really love that. And you would never know at the open mic or here tonight that, that there were any nerves. And I think that, that mantra shows in what you're saying too, that like, nobody cares more about it than me. I have to show up. I'm doing this for me, even if I'm scared. Like this means something. This means a lot to me. I think that's so beautiful. Both of your pearls of wisdom, so lovely, so like self honoring. Honoring who we are and why we're doing this, and how we're unique in that too. I really love it. A book recommendation.
I'm gonna just move 2 feet and grab some poetry books by my bed and show them to you.
Yum!
Okay.
Go for it.
I'm right here and I'm just grabbing what's there.
No, Chris often goes to the bookshelf.
Visual aids,
cool. We love it.
are very helpful, I think.
Just so I could keep. I'm just gonna grab this is what I'm reading right now. So this is the one. This is the one. Wait, I have trouble with spatial.
You're good.
Yeah. So this is a beautiful book about writing, and I've been reading slowly, and it doesn't keep me up at night. And
Nice.
every page I stop and take a picture of something, and it's 3 steps on the ladder of writing. And I don't think I've been this excited about a book about writing in maybe ever.
That's awesome.
It's phenomenal. And then this book of poetry I've started, and I read through it once, but with poetry you have to read things a lot.
Yeah.
You can see it there. It is
Nomenclature.
Beyond Grand Nomenclature. Yeah. And I think it just won something. I forget. I think it just won a big award. And it's beautiful. I'm about to read this. I heard Jennifer Franklin read by this. If Some God Shakes Your House, I heard her read from this here in Syracuse, and it was beautiful. And so I just want to give a shout out to her. And I have more, but I'm going to let KJ. I don't want to.
I love those recommendations, Jessica. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to limit yourself.
It is.
Excited.
So
KJ,
my
what keeps you up at night reading?
Mine are, I'm going to go totally different route. They're not romantic comedy at all.
Okay.
They're all like business books. So,
Amazing.
so the first one is, well, actually the first one's a craft book. So if you're looking for like a good craft book about fiction, there's a book by Janet Burroway called Writing Fiction. That was my favorite MFA craft book that I read. I found it to be just really accessible. Some of the other texts that I had to read on like the big list of 40 were just really thick and sort of antiquated. And she took from those texts and just synthesized them in a way that I found really like just accessible. So I really, really like that as a craft book.
Yeah.
And then I do spend a lot of time reading business books about writing because that's not something I really learned. So the only way I can learn about the business is from these books. So Jane Friedman is a rock star, and she has a book called The Business of Being a Writer.
That's awesome.
Her most recent edition, I believe, came out in 2019. So it's also a touch antiquated from a marketing standpoint because so much has changed with regard to social media. But it's a really, really great book, and it's very honest. And so it like puts stuff out there about like money and like making a living doing it. And like all of that is very upfront. And I think that's really important.
Totally.
The other one that I love is by Courtney Malm, and it's called Before and After the Book Deal. And so at any point in the process, you could hit that book and there's something that you can take for the moment that you're in. And like, whatever panic attack you're having, like I had a full-on panic attack about Goodreads, and then I found like reading your reviews, and I printed it, and now it lives right here on the desk.
I love it. KJ, that's great.
So I really think that if you want to be a commercial fiction writer, which I know that's not, generally what everybody wants to do, but that was what I wanted to do. It is just as much about business as it is about the craft. So you kind of have to be a savvy business consumer. So those are mine.
That is so cool. That is so cool. Thank you so much for those recommendations, both of you. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. One more round of applause for Jessica Cuello and KJ Micciche. Woo! Thank you also so much for our awesome audience. Thank you for joining us. A treat to see you all. I'm just seeing you over there at midnight. I wonder if you're still around.
Yeah.
Incredible to have James Garcia out here. That was so fun. And always good to be hanging out with you, Chris.
And you, Katie, mom and dad's house over there.
Mom and dad's house. Yes. It was an incredible evening. Really enjoyed both of you. Remember to go check out all of the comments and love that you've gotten out in Facebook, YouTube. We can't track Twitter live, but we always have some folks watching over there. So please do check it out. It will be, where all of our readings are archived up on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. But Chris, what do we have coming up next week? Remind us.
Next week, that's right. We got Jack Powers and Sharbari Ahmed going to be here, and it's going to be great. And then the following week, we go live in person at Eco Evolution. So tune in. And also, Katie and I will be at the Westport Writers Workshop. What's it called? Pitch and Publish.
Pitch and Publish.
I always want to say publish or perish, but it's and yes, that's on the 20th. That's the day after our open mic. But if you go to westportwriters.org, you can get the information. Katie's will be moderating a panel, and I will be on the panel talking about getting published, telling all kinds of horror stories. It'll be fantastic.
Horror stories. It's going to be a great time. Please do come check it out if you can. Once again, thank you so much, Jessica Cuello and KJ Micciche.
You.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun. KJ, it was great to meet you.
Oh, you too. It was awesome. Your poetry is beautiful.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your humor. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.